You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 271, American Head Charge. Hosted by Dan Terry.
Trust me, guys, it'll be fine.
And Joseph Wren. Let's go back to you with the boombox. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if your violent reaction to a tango umbrella involves a chain gun and the BFG 9000, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. New Metal May returns. We thought we were done. Then Dan said, I think we should charge right into New Metal May. An American Head Charge right into New Metal May.
What I actually said was that I don't want to do Industrial December anymore. I never said anything about not doing New Metal May. I'll let you decide. If you're not familiar with this show, normally we talk about heavy bands, like super, super heavy bands. Unless, for some reason somebody decides they want to talk about Symphony X or something like that. But that's fine. I had nothing to do with that. I'm sorry. But we are huge fans of another little podcast called Roach Coach. And our friends Lauren, Matt, and Jenny every single week review a new metal album. I've been listening to Roach Coach most of the time that we've been doing Discography Discussion. And in honor of the Roach Coach podcast, we thought every single May we're going to talk about only new metal bands so that we can get a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be in the new metal trenches. The only difference is we have to listen to the whole discography of said new metal band. So, whenever we get to some of these legacy new metal bands that have been around up until modern day, they usually have, 12 or 13 records for us to listen to, and it can get rough. If you want an example of that, go listen to the Korn featuring Lauren Kozlowski of Roach Coach episode to see exactly what that looks like. Thankfully, though, American Head Charge, they were cool, and it was only, 4 records. I mean, I'm sure they probably wanted to put more, but I was actually pretty surprised by this band because, honestly, I've heard them before, but I guess I wasn't paying attention or I had them confused with a different band because I was like, oh, God, I got to listen to this, and it's going to be some sort of, kind of heavy rock that's not going to be that interesting. And then, I listened to their first record, and I was like, wait a minute, is American Head Charge actually awesome?
American Head Charge is the template My Ticket Home would later pull from when they release that glorious record. Strangers Only.
It should be on your playlist at all times?
It's on your playlist at all times, Dan. It's on my playlist, a little bit higher than Wolfgang Van Halen, but that's semantics and the fact that the record's been out longer. I do a chronological thing. I just start adding records to a list that I constantly go back to. It's most of the music I've heard doing this show that I love so very much. And nu metal will always be one of those styles that I go back to. I have one guitar that I keep in the right tuning to play nu metal at all times. Because never forget, especially right now with some newer nu metal albums coming out. I know Limp Bizkit put out Still Sucks, and we all rejoiced. Amidst all the chaos of the last 2 years, we got nu metal. To use Lauren Kozlowski's line, nu metal is back. I say nu metal never went away. And American Head Charge, I wish they hadn't gone away. They took a break close to the end, and it's unfortunate, but it's a good thing, because the band at least went out on a blazing nu metal high note that we are going to get into shortly.
Yeah, I mean, this band has a really interesting sort of journey, musical arc. I definitely get sort of a Nothing Face kind of vibe as far as this is a band that was great, that was definitely not recognized, I think, enough. And unfortunately, they end sort of in tragedy, which is unfortunate. I hate to see a good band stop for stupid reasons. Not that somebody dying that was a principal songwriter is a stupid reason, but it's stupid in that, when you have a band that I enjoy listening to this much, it's a shame that they have to be subjected to the same earthly mortality that we all have to suffer through.
Mortality is indeed stupid.
They should, yeah. I hate mortality. We're an anti-mortality podcast. Not anti-morality, anti-mortality.
One step closer to my cyberpunk brain download fantasy.
But like you were saying about, nu metal and it never went away. It definitely went away for me for a while. I mean, there was definitely a period of time where I was definitely too cool to listen to nu metal.
You learned.
Well, now I have kids, so it doesn't matter how cool I try to act. I'm not cool, so why not listen to the new Limp Bizkit album, right? Or listen to some American Head Charge.
Well, before Dan lifts the hammer and dives right in, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews. We
do enjoy some reviews on Discography Discussion. Leave us a review wherever you can, or if you want to get personal about it, send an email to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. with anything you got, band suggestions, whether you like the show, whether you hate the show, whether you think that we should all just dip our balls in sulfuric acid. I mean, whatever you got to say, just go ahead and say it. Send us an email. And you know what else you can send us an email about? If you would like to sponsor an episode of this podcast, send us an email. Once again, danandjoeshow@gmail.com. Let us know what you're peddling, and we'll see if we can help you peddle it, as long as you send us some money.
What about the Discord server, Dan? Shouldn't people get on that Discord server and talk about all the metal?
Yeah, I mean, there's a link to the Discord server in the show notes of this episode that you're listening to right now. No. That's the pause button. No, click on the pause button. Click on the link that is to the Discord. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and download the app. Say yes to everything. Yeah. You want to join the Discord. That's where me and Joe hang out mostly. So, if you want to hang out with me and Joe, that's really the place to do it. Let's shout out some of our beloved patrons, and that would include the likes of. Wait, who are all these people? I'm kidding. These people are John Drake, who you guys probably know.
Oh, come on!
Aaron Phillips. That's a new one. I haven't seen that one yet, so thank you, Aaron Phillips. Evan Merkel, Lost Fiction, Kyle Driver, Timu, I'm not going to say your last name. I'm just not going to do it. Joe, let me know. I was on vacation. I was on podcation when you messaged us and said that we've been butchering your name for a long time. You've been a patron for a long time. And in exchange for us butchering your name, you have requested a Trivium episode. We are working on that Trivium episode, and we will try to get it out for you as soon as we possibly can. And keep your ears open on some upcoming episodes, because we're going to tell everybody what the secret is to getting an episode, like as soon as they want it. But it's a secret. It's a secret, so I can't tell you right now. Dangerous Dave, Richard Renz, Big T, Josiah Heiberg, Brandon Miranda, Ken Zapla, Jeremy Prince, Josh Moser, David Brown, Samuel Woodward, Brian the Dean, Lance Allagood,
the King of Metal,
and Patrick Asplund. Thank you guys so much. You are the music makers, and you are the dreamers of the dreams.
And if you'd like to get in on that album review feed along with everything else we post on Patreon, check out patreon.com/discussmetal or patreon.discussmetal.com. I've been working on those short links, Dan. Are they making everything better for you?
I mean, I like short links because I have this weird problem that when something's highlighted in blue, I like to read everything that's in the link. And if the link's too long, unfortunately, that's whenever my ADD kicks in and I can't finish reading the link. So short links, good. Long links, very, very bad.
Are you excited? So, Dan, tell me and the listeners all about American Head Charge.
Well, Joe and the listeners, American Head Charge is a metal band from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Let me know if I got that right. These guys have been around for quite a while. They were more or less kind of in that 90s, sort of late 90s. I'm going to say it's 1997 whenever this band started. And they had some names before American Head Charge. If you're curious, you want to hear what those names are, Joe? You're going to have to bleep out some of them, but let's go for it. The first one was Flux, which I think is a pretty cool band name and easily good for vandalism. Another one was called Gestapo Ranch, and the other one was called Warsaw Ghetto. But they couldn't use the name Flux because it was already being used by another band, so they dropped it so that they didn't get, sued right into the ground. And I think I don't really have to explain why the other names didn't work out.
Those weren't going to go in the modern heavy metal radio scene, if the radio was a scene back in the 90s.
Well, I don't think radio was what they were worried about at first, especially once we start talking about their first album. But basically they came up with the name American Head Charge, and nobody really knows why. They've never publicly said that. Basically, just saying that the name doesn't actually have a meaning. It just sounds really cool. There was actually there actually was. I can't remember what it was. If it was an album or it was a band. It was a dub band that was called African Head Charge. But supposedly that's completely unrelated. But I don't know. It's a very strange history of a band name. But I don't know. American Head Charge is a really cool name. I can't even explain why.
This is the 90s. We're talking about bands that were pre-file sharing who didn't want to be that thrash band from the 80s anymore. It wasn't about being Iron Maiden or being fantasy driven or trying to be something that's mysterious. It was all about the fucking beef and just being the heaviest thing you possibly could be without being brutal. It was about attitude. And I could see the name Head Charge being something cool that the band just latched onto. What does it mean? It doesn't really mean anything. But American Head Charge, that reminds me of bands like The Band, who get credit as an example of what American music was back in their time. So when you listen to American Head Charge in 1999, when they put their first album out, Trepidation, is this what American music is supposed to sound like? I think it was becoming popular music at the time, but it wasn't quite the same as your Korn or Limp Bizkit band would be.
I don't know, man. I hear a lot. They've got a lot of different influences going on this record. And I have to say that this is my favorite American Head Charge album.
Wow, dude.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's independently released, so the gloves are off as far as what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. There's a lot of stuff going on though on this record, and I think that number one, the lo-fi sound of it actually makes it more enjoyable for me because there's some weird compartment in my brain that's oh, it's lo-fi, so that means it's good. But there's heavy Korn-ish guitars here. There are predominantly screamed vocals. Dude's got a hell of a bark on him. Can also sing in a Alice in Chains with a little bit of Godsmack mixed in. I'm not really sure. Those are definitely not my favorite parts of the album, but I think they are a good contrast from just being shouted at with brutal riffs. But I think that these guys have really brutal riffs. They have a very good vocalist who can sing and scream. And then there's just samples. So many samples going on in the background. Now, this is a real band. This is not like an industrial act, in the traditional sense, in that it's not like a guitar player, a bass player, a singer, and a drum machine. This is a real rock band sitting down playing these songs. And then they just basically went in and were like, all right, let's add all this cool crap to it. And so I hear a lot of bands in this. I hear Korn. I hear a little bit of Limp Bizkit. Some of the vocals I don't think are totally rapped, but it almost seems as if they're trying to rap. It's hard to explain. The best example of that I could think of is the song Seamless, where it's it's that thing where we didn't call it rap, but I think that's what they were trying to do, but then they wouldn't admit now that that's what they were trying to do. But there's a hell of a groove at the beginning of that song, and the way his rhythmic delivery, which I think is how we trademarked that vocal style on the show. His rhythmic delivery is very on point. And this thing got me pumped. I was at work, moving carts, lifting boxes, doing those things that I do while listening to this record. And we don't wear headphones at work, so all my coworkers were listening to it as well. And I had a lot of people be like, "Dude, is this one of those throwback bands?" And I was like, "No, dude, this is legit from 1999." And they're like, "Dude, it sounds like a total time capsule." And it's weird because I would have thought that for some reason I kept thinking of American Head Charge as some ancient band. And I guess like if you're like under the age of like 20, that probably is true. But 1999, for whatever reason, doesn't seem that long ago to me. So, because I mean, 1999, Limp Bizkit and Korn were already popular. System of a Down was already out. Nu metal was more or less. So I guess if we're allowed to use Roach Coach terms, just this month only, this would have been, what they call right in the thick of it, and it's definitely a time capsule to that sound, because even though normally I wouldn't describe a band like this as original because of all of the different influences I hear, American Head Charge has a level of aggression that a lot of nu metal bands don't have. Other bands sound more gimmicky, like they're just doing it because, well, this is what nu metal is supposed to sound like. There's a lot of like real anger in these songs, and a lot of anger and frustration and a realness that comes through a lot more clearly due to this being an independently released album.
Anytime you say nu metal, there's going to be Korn in it, especially in the 90s. There's going to be Limp Bizkit. There's going to be System of a Down. But I hear snot, and I love me some snot.
Definitely does taste a little bit salty, like there might be some snot in here. Yeah.
So you have the vibe. It's not punk rock, but it's that punk rock driving forward energy, that rhythmic delivery. I love bringing that back every May. We don't get to use it all the time through the year. Straight up Lynn, to me. Lynn had a vibe. He had a way of delivering all of the vocals at once that he says wasn't really influenced by anyone. He just kind of developed his own style. So to hear somebody else give that same 90s barked delivery that is not death growls, it's not that type of heavy metal, but it has that vibe. It's the time capsule of the 90s. It's the end of the decade. Everybody was trying to either cash in or they were trying to play along. But American Head Charge, they took the "we need a DJ" portion of the record and threw the turntable down the stairs. Almost an Incubus science level of how much random shit can we throw in here.
This is just unhinged. This is nu metal where you didn't have a label coming in and saying like, okay guys, here's what you guys need to do. Yeah, this is literally like, these are the songs that we wrote. We're angry, we're upset, we're playing this aggressive music. And, I heard this record and I was like, man, this feels very real. This feels very legitimate, if that's a way you can describe music. And I felt a real connection with it, even all of this many years later. I'd literally never heard this record before this week. And it blew me away. I've listened to it 5 or 6 other times just for fun. And, I liked the record. But more importantly, do you know who else ended up liking this record?
It's 1999. I'm going to say Fred Durst.
Wrong. Rick Rubin.
That checks out.
I mean, why would you not want to put American Head Charge on American recordings? Right? Right? I mean, like that's what RR, thinks. So let's go for it, right? I mean, it's Rick Rubin. He's gonna sign your band. And to finish up our chat on Trepanation, I think this is still awesome. If anybody has a physical copy of this record that they want to sell to me, please email us at danandjoeshow@gmail.com, because I would be very interested in having a physical copy of this if it exists. I want to have a special shout out to Aleph Nu Metal on YouTube, who was happy enough to upload this so that not specifically so that we could listen to it, but just so that everyone would have access to it. And as long as we don't get in trouble, we might even link it in the show notes. because, it's on YouTube. So if it gets... Okay, if you're listening to this 15 years from now and you click on that link and it doesn't go anywhere, like we don't accept any responsibility for that. But you can listen to it right now, and I think that you should. I'm not usually this positive, but this really surprised me, and I enjoyed it. I mean, sure, I have some minor criticisms. Obviously, the sound quality's not up to snuff, but I'm not going to judge it. It's not like Rick Rubin produced it. More on that later. It's definitely, it feels about right. Like if I had heard this in 1999, I would have been like, this is the best band that you've never heard of. You guys need to go check this out. This is way better than all that mainstream garbage that you guys are listening to. This would have been my go-to album for the next 3 years.
Well, hold on there, Discuss Metal Dan. In 2001, you get the War of Art.
Oh boy, the War of Art. Okay, so
let's take Trepidation and just bring it forward in the production department, but don't change any of the attitude or the energy. I love this fucking record. This is the only starting point I've ever had for this band. So being able to hear the first album and hear the same vibe, but just raw, I'm glad in hindsight that it just didn't change. The band stuck with it. It's nu metal as fuck. I love it. They've got melody where they need it. They've got attitude all the time. The drums are fucking groovy, but they're not so insanely driven. They're just there to be the fucking beat. Now get heavy, get intense, throw your samples in, and just fuck everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is if you hadn't noticed from the track listings, there's a lot of stuff recycled, obviously, from Trepidation, and I'm totally fine with that. This is the big budget re-release. This is the HD remaster, of this record. But unlike an HD remaster, it's not it's not just, they didn't just take a Vaseline filter and smudge it all over the record. This is just the big budget version of that previous album, with a lot more, with some new songs, some old ones reused. The new version of Seamless is still my go-to. And honestly, if this had come out, in 1999 instead of 2001, this record would have sold a lot better. See, there's some other things that were going on in 2001 that you may have heard of. There was a very big event that took place in 2001, and let's just say that American Head charges the Art of War album,
the War of Art. Get it right. The War of Art album, which features an American flag being trampled by a tank, and the amount of police siren samples and things that are on this record. I think it's great. Listening to it in a vacuum here in 2022, I'm totally this is so cool. But this was this album was sort of a casualty to the 9/11. Can't really say it's the 9/11 bump. It's more the Impact.
A lot of bands. Yeah, when we were talking about this a little bit in the Power Man 5000 episode, how you can't drop a single called Drop the Bombshell. The people just didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear I feel so alive.
There was a day, there was a time, there was many months and years where everyone did not want to hear this. And it's unfortunate for the artist because everything is hindsight in 2022. So to hear a band that, for me, I mentioned Snot earlier, and Lynn's vocals are something that I've always looked for. Anytime I've got a new band, and if I can find a slight comparison to that style, I'm usually on board because I really, really enjoy what that band put together and was only able to put together really one time. Yes, they did a follow-up with several guests as a tribute to Lynn, but only having one record, there's a part of me that is still empty because those vocals really were never duplicated. This is one of the closest comparisons I've ever been able to make. So every time I'm listening to this album, every time I'm listening to this band, I get excited because it's more of that. And it's unfortunate that the band was impacted musically because it impacted their career. That's the part that I think you can focus on and say it was unfortunate in 2001 that a lot of bands had a harder time because everything that they had recorded up to that point was the opposite of what everybody wanted to hear. And I know we're not quite to the feeding in 2005, but I'm just thankful this band stuck around for a few more years and gave it another shot.
Yeah, I mean, The War of Art is one of the, and should be remembered as one of the classic nu metal records. And I think a lot of people think that about it right now. I mean, even though, sales did suffer, this album did end up eventually being able to sell over 250,000 copies, which, probably isn't what Korn's able to sell. Or it's probably less than what Korn can sell and less than what Disturbed can sell, or even Limp Bizkit that year. Because, Limp Bizkit was just all about having a party, so people were still cool with parties and all of that. But yeah, American Head Charge just came in too hard. I mean, and I think that is my favorite kind of band, where people are just like, ooh, that's like a little too much, and it is aggressive. It's more aggressive than a lot of nu metal was that year. I mean, 2000, 2001, that was like around the time of like Chocolate Starfish, and nu metal bands were starting to change already. At this point, they were going in a more melodic direction, a little bit more smoothed out vocals,
They were getting ready for the come down.
They were getting ready for the come down, yes, to use another Roach coach.
We're just going to get all these out right in front, aren't we?
I mean, they wouldn't be good terms if they didn't apply, And, and during the come down, what a lot of these bands did, and what we mean by the come down, is a lot of nu metal bands kind of went more of in an alternative rock direction. That's even where you started seeing terms like alternative metal being thrown out there, because number one, nobody wanted to be called nu metal, like literally nobody, especially at that time. And so you call yourself groove metal, or you call yourself alternative metal, or you just tell people you're a rock band. That's my favorite. Even when Joe and I were in a melodic hardcore band, I would just tell people that I sang for a rock band, just because I didn't feel like getting into all the semantics. But this record is incredible, and I was blown away by hearing obviously the ultra crisp, ultra clean Rick Rubin production on this. Hearing some of those songs. It's cool that I have some of these songs like Seamless, like I've mentioned a whole bunch of times now. It's probably my favorite song by them. Is hearing the lo-fi version and the HD version is a lot of fun for me to have that compare and contrast. But these guys did stick around. But unfortunately, part of the story of American Head Charge, there's a little bit of tragedy there. But before we get into the tragedy, I don't know about you, but I've been on this I've been on this one meal a day diet for such a long time that, every day I wake up and I go to work and then I come home. And when I come home, I am ready for the feeding.
2005. If your band could sound more like 2000 nu metal, this band found a way to do it. They took a step backwards in the production, in my opinion, but they kept the melody. They kept the heavy, and they have the most 90s nu metal album cover, some type of hand-drawn, caricatured clown with one of those fonts that you could find on your Windows 98 PC. Then they just start marching forward like nothing ever changed. Why am I only now able to listen to this record with so much hindsight and joy? This is exactly what I was looking for in 2005, and I didn't find it until 2016.
Well, that's just, your problem, Joe. No, I'm kidding.
100%.
To give a little bit of background on this. So, Joe, you mentioned the production, and I think the reason the production has changed a bit has a little bit to do with the fact that when they were starting to demo recordings for this album, I mean, obviously they were going to go Rick Rubin again, but they said Rick Rubin was like, the only documentation I can find is that he was, quote, increasingly elusive, and they didn't want to work with him anymore. So they asked if they could get out of their contract, and then he was just like, okay. So the band ended up not re-signing, but they ended up signing with DRT Entertainment to put out the feeding, and that record was produced by Greg Fiddleman. But to his credit, he did not do a bad job. I think this band sounds better when they're a little bit dirty.
Anytime you take one of these classic sounding nu metal bands, or any band that doesn't really push the single, and I don't think you could accuse this band of trying to push the single on any of the albums, but I could see anyone who doesn't understand or doesn't appreciate or just isn't the right fit for what Rick Rubin's style historically has been. I could see them wanting to get out of that and make music on their own. More than one artist has talked about Rick Rubin and how great he is for the product and how he stays out of the artist's way, how he comes in at the end and he just tweaks it in his own way to make some of the best albums you've ever heard. But imagine not knowing that. Imagine the hype train that is Rick Rubin, and then you have to do album number 2, and where is that guy? This is before you had hindsight about Rick Rubin and how he stays out of the artist's way. This is 2005 when music is changing, popular music is changing, attitudes are changing, and you're not there to give the band the advice that they're looking for. I could see it being the wrong fit. It obviously didn't impact the music that much, but 2005 was a different time. We didn't know the things that we know now. So the band stuck to their guns. They wrote some new songs. They put out a new album. And at a time when everything came out sounding bad, in my opinion, like everyone was trying to mix for MP3, but they didn't know how to do it just yet, I'm so glad this album doesn't sound that way. This album has a little bit different production, but it's just as heavy. It's just as intense. It still has the right vibe, and it's not artificial in any way, shape, or form. What more could you want in 2005 other than hardcore vocals, Dan?
I find it really interesting to hear a record this unabashedly nu metal come out in 2005. Because, speaking of hardcore and metalcore and all that stuff, I mean, that was kind of the cream of the crop at this time. So to hear a record that sounds like this that year, I mean, I know they sold 100,000 copies of it, which is really admirable, but is kind of half of what the last one did, because the last one was released in the prime of nu metal. And there was a lot of obstacles that had to be overcome to get to this point. I think this is probably the most mainstream sounding American Head Charge album. You have a decent amount of clean vocals. They're more upbeat. They're a little bit more up tempo. But again, unabashedly early 2000s nu metal. And I'm here for it because I like the fact that the dude does mostly screams, which is unique to me in nu metal bands, especially in 2005. And, they're going for really, really, and a really aggressive sound. It kind of reminds me of Dry Kill Logic, how they were an above average heavy nu metal band with mostly scream vocals, although they kind of did the smart thing and went metalcore, as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
In sort of an inverse of My Ticket Home, who started this metalcore and became progressively more nu metal as they went. But yeah, not that I think that they sound like Dry Kill Logic. It really, the band they remind me the most of is Snot, like Joe said. And also a little bit of Nothing Face, because they've got that 90s hard edge where it's all about the groove and the heaviness of the riff. And they're not afraid to slow it down to go heavy and accentuate their screamed vocals. It all fits together really well. And if this had been the album that came out by American Head Charge in 2001, they'd still be remembered as one of the biggest bands in this genre, because this is exactly what you would have wanted that year. I'm just not sure that it's what people would have wanted in 2005. Although I got to give a shout out to seaoftranquility.org, where the reviewer Duncan Glenday on September 23rd, 2005, did describe this record as avant-garde nu metal. Now, I'm not sure what his personal definition of avant-garde is, but I don't personally disagree with that, but I think this is a damn good nu metal album. And I think it's unabashedly what it is. The band is who they are. And at the beginning of this episode, I kind of described the band as feeling more immediate and more legitimate in a way than a lot of bands. And what's more legitimate than sticking with the thing that you have always done? You know, we give high praise to bands like Cannibal Corpse, who, after all these years, still sounds like Cannibal Corpse. Napalm Death, after all these years, sounds like Napalm Death. AC/DC still sounds like AC/DC. You know, these bands that stuck with the iconic sound that they started with. Now, granted, all those bands were more successful than American Head Charge, but I'm still going to give them props for doing it. And to put out a record that was still enjoyable, especially when compared to the rest of their discography, I got a very, very consistent sound. But unfortunately, you know, as I've been sort of hinting at since the beginning of this episode, there is some tragedy that we need to sort of get into. So right after this record came out, the band's guitarist Brian Ottosson passed away in April of 2005 at the age of 27. While the band was on tour, they literally found him in his in his bunk, and you know, police did discover a bottle of pills and yada yada yada. Because they apparently said that it was reported that he died of a accidental drug overdose, but it turns out that he just had like some strep throat medicine. It wasn't like hardcore drugs or anything like that. And they said that like the night before they'd had like maybe 2 or 3 drinks of alcohol, and the dude they were all sober and it was all good, and the dude was fine, and woke up the next morning and he was dead. That sucks. We see it a lot, and it's very heartbreaking because like these guys had a great thing going. They had a great, sound, and it sounds like they were pushing through. If they had held on a few more years, at that point, nu metal was going to come back in a big way. And I think American Head Charge would have still been rocking, could have still been rocking to this very day. But the good news is this is normally where we would end the episode and be like, yeah, that sucks, man. Final thoughts. What's your album of the week? See you guys next week. Blah, 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 right? But no, American Head Charge did charge right on through into the latter 2000s. Because because the band did not break up right after the death of their guitarist. They did actually release a DVD called Can't Stop the Machine and a live album that came with it, and a bunch of unreleased songs. So there was a lot of really cool stuff. And they pressed on all the way till about 2009, and they decided that they were going to disband.
If the band disbanded in 2009, how do we get 2016's Tango Umbrella?
Well, I was just about to tell you that. They were broken up for about 2 years, and in 2011 they made an announcement that they were going to rehearse and make more music, and they had a lineup together. They released they recorded an EP called Shoot, I believe it was called. Yeah, Shoot. And that came out in 2013. So you did have some actual activity from the band. And they kind of went, they toured off of that. They went full on active. And in 2014, they did what bands in 2014 do. And to gauge interest, I would assume, they started an Indiegogo campaign for a new album. And of course, they got like $53,000 for doing that. And they continued to tour. And finally, they released Tango Umbrella in March of 2016 on Napalm Records, which is the label you want to be on if you are a resurgent nu metal band. I never did understand how that works, though. Like, you're signed to our label, but you need to crowdfund the record. You need to crowdfund the record because the music industry is just, it just doesn't exist. I don't know how that works. I don't know if they like raised the money for the album and then Napalm decided to distribute it for them or what happened with that. But, you know what, man, this all makes me uncomfortable. We're just here to talk about the music. So let's get into it. Tango Umbrella.
It's about time. This band, I'm just kidding. In 2016, we were talking about making a podcast, talking about all things metal. And I remember a time when we were adamant nu metal was going to be off the table for a while. American Head Charge puts out a new album in 2016. It actually doesn't remind me of the classic records. It reminds me more of the later Static X records and some of those decisions. Even his voice is a little bit more Wayne Static, a little less Lynn on this one, but that's fine. In 2016, before I got my dose of My Ticket Home and the rest of the world finally got on board with nu metal as the glorious thing that it is, American Head Charge, it just sounds like they're doing the damn thing. It doesn't sound like they're trying to prove anything to anybody or trying to come back. I'm sure everything that they had to endure, losing what had to be one of the most important members of the band, not just because he plays guitar, but because he was in the band for so long. I don't know what that feels like, but to come back and make new music, ask your fans to help you make that music and get that backing to get it out there with a record label, a major label that is able to push resurging metal bands and still does to this day. What more do you want but a droning, dirging nu metal record in 2016? Because this album is the opposite of everything that was coming out in 2016. If anything, this was before its time. If the band could be accused of coming to the party late in the 90s, they were definitely early to the party here.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure it was about that, really. I mean, this is the heaviness of this band fully realized with its sweet 2016 production value. These riffs pop so hard, and the band is just as heavy as they were on their very first album, which is just mind-blowing when you think about the fact that this was an American recordings artist band. I mean, even Slayer got like weaker over time, in my opinion. Yep, go ahead and start typing up the email right now. But yeah, I mean, this is peak American Head Charge. This is great. I like, and again, I experienced all of this at once. So like, if you have, the only way you can tell that this record didn't come out immediately after the feeding is the production itself. You can obviously tell that this came out, in the mid 2010s, and yeah, this thing absolutely blew me away. It was a great cap off from the previous 3 albums before it. I mean, these guys definitely have a vision, and they have something that a lot of bands lack, and that's consistency. I know on this show sometimes we will slam bands if they don't change enough, but that's usually when you've got like 9 or 10 or 11 albums that all sound the same. These guys have 4. 2 of them sound kind of the same because they have a lot of the same songs on them. But, overall, this is one of the most consistent bands I think we've ever done on this show. And, I don't like giving out the Sure Thing Award, but if you like heavy, aggressive nu metal with scream vocals, with a really deep groove and a level of legitimacy and aggression, this is American Head Charge displaying all of that on their most recent album.
It's the right kind of consistency. The band is just enough aggressive, just enough heavy. Yeah, it's nu metal, but nu metal's not a dirty word. It never really has been. Not really. So to have a band that can find the good in every aspect of metal and just keep doing what they do, give you the right kind of energy and the right kind of feedback, but not drag you along and make you buy into whatever their new progressive product is. This band has the right amount of everything. The right amount of melody, the right amount of groove, the right amount of extreme. The only time this band isn't heavy is when they're giving you that break. We talk about it all the time on the show. In order to have something be fast and heavy and extreme, it has to be next to something slow, melodic, and chill. And this band just works the slider. Like a good DJ going from the left turntable to the right turntable. They just move it enough to keep you interested in the next thing. And by the time I got to the end of it, I wanted to go back to the beginning. So I decided to work my way backwards. Give that a shot, why don't you?
Oh, I've definitely done it before. I didn't do it with this band. I wanted to start at the dirty, nitty-gritty beginning. Because I like to hear bands progress. I like to hear that journey that they go on. And this band went on quite the journey. And unfortunately, I have to end this discussion on Again, a little bit more of a downer note because these guys deserve better than what they get, but unfortunately, their co-founder and bass player Chad Hanks passed away in November of 2017 due to a terminal illness. And that absolutely sucks. He did get to he did handpick a bunch of he did get to pitch a whole bunch of bands to play at his sort of memorial show, which is kind of cool. I hope that one day when I pass away, I can choose what bands play my memorial show if anybody actually cares that much. But
got you covered there, buddy.
All right, well, make sure it happens. It's just Zayo playing for 6 hours, so I mean, make sure you buy him lots of energy drinks, and nicotine patches and all that.
Will do.
All right, but yeah, I mean, I'm just going to jump right into final thoughts. I don't need to be prompted. American Head Charge is awesome. If you like new metal, check out American Head Charge. Listen to any of them. Like, I literally can personally recommend all 4 of the records. I'm not usually this positive either. I promise, somebody didn't give me happy pills before we did this episode, but I legitimately enjoyed listening to this band. I had no qualms, no issues. I mean, yeah, I could have been maybe a little bit nitpickier on a few things, but overall, the vibe's good. The heavy, the aggressive, and legitimate vibe. This band, its whole aesthetic just ended up really working for me, and I didn't expect that. So I think that you can have a very similar experience yourself.
Every New Metal May, we talk about bands that we love to listen to, and we look for bands that we haven't heard before. In a genre that so many people spent so much time downsizing and diminishing and not appreciating for what it is. It's that Alice in Chains root taken to its heaviest. We do New Metal May in honor of the Roach Coach, but we do it because we love this genre. We love taking time away from the normal that is this podcast and what extreme progressive metalcore black metal band do we want to talk about this week, because the year of flow throughout the different genres, this is our fun month, if I can call it that. And anytime I get to sit down with a band that I've heard but I haven't listened to, or I haven't listened to in a long time, I come away with more joy and more appreciation for this area of metal that I love so much. And American Head Charge is a band that a lot of people missed out on. If you didn't, props to you. You were there from the beginning, or you were there when it was happening. For me, I get to look back and I get to say, here's a band that had everything I wanted. I should have been listening to them the whole time. I am listening to them now, as much as I can. They're on the shelf. They're on the list. You need to listen to American Head Charge. You're going to get the groove. You're going to get the attitude. You're going to get everything that you want from a good new metal band. What more could you want than a band that didn't get enough while they were around, but gave so much in spite of everything that got in their way along the way? Listen to this band. You're going to love it. Dan, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is not new metal, coincidentally. I needed American Head Charge to kind of break up kind of the onslaught of death metal and black metal and death grind that I've been listening to this week. And but if I had to settle on an album of the week, I would say it's definitely Bleed the Future by Archspire from last year. It's a ripper, man. I can't wait till we talk about this album on Patreon, because when we do, Joe's going to accuse the drums of being fake. He might even accuse the entire band of being fake. We're not 100% sure on that, so make sure you're signing up for Patreon, $1 a month, to hear that prediction and see how accurate it is.
Well, you can save my predictions for me. My album of the week is Vengeance Falls by Trivium. He wasn't kidding. We're working on that episode. And
we'll do it.
This might be my favorite album by Trivium, but stay tuned for that episode when we give our final thoughts on that band. New Metal May 2022. It's stacked.
We're off to a good start. Don't expect this glowing over review of some other bands that we're talking about. Because some of them I've already listened to. And, yeah.
Take us out, DFT.
Hey, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. We appreciate you. Make sure you guys are liking the podcasts on social media, where if you see a social media blast, just like it, share it with your friends. We appreciate it when you guys do that. Send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com if you want to ask us a question or, submit some show ideas or really anything that you want to talk to us about. Or, again, if you want to sponsor an episode of this podcast, definitely hit us up there. And you can always hang out with us on our Discord server. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you right to Discord. We've got some really cool stuff coming down the pipe for you guys that may or may not include, some free stickers. I know those are long overdue, and we want to get those out to you guys. So, I will on the next episode, I will have a plan on how to connect you with stickers that have our logo on it. So, make sure, because these are going to be the classic logo, and this is like the only time we're going to make stickers of them. So make sure you are tuned in for that. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much again.
And on that note, this has been episode 271 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Scrooge McDuckin through your money.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.